Hello and welcome to another episode of View from the Tilton Road, airing every week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Kieran, your host for this episode. Joining me this week, I've got Elliot, Dan, and also joining us, former Blues manager Lee Clark. Lee, thanks for your time. How are you?
Very good, Kieran. Thanks for having us on. Let's crack on and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, plenty of stuff to talk about, I'm sure. Obviously, main thing you're on for is to talk about the Blues, but we will obviously touch on your playing career first of all. Obviously, you started out with your boyhood club, Newcastle. Just talk to us a bit about what that was like coming through there at a young age and starting out at the club you've always supported.
Well, I suppose it's like anybody. I mean, you guys are blue noses. If you had the opportunity to represent Birmingham City, it would be a dream come true. You'd be living the dream. That's what happened with me. To make me debut at 17 and then be part of a group of players in an era where, without going on to win something big in terms of the Premier League or a big cup competition, one of the best times in Newcastle's history because we were always challenging to win the Premier League. I think in the 5 or 6 seasons we worked under Kevin in the Premier League, we finished 6th once and we were all gutted. So, it was living the dream. And then obviously to end my career back there as well, after a couple of moves, was a really terrific way for the playing side to start and finish. So, yeah, that side of it, really positive. And I take a lot of positivity that I wasn't someone who was always looking to move around as well. I only had the 3 clubs as a player. And was successful in different periods with them and loyal to those clubs.
You played with some great players back then, didn't you? You were playing with Rob Lee and Gary Speed, God bless him, and you had a really good side back then with Newcastle, didn't you?
Listen, we had some sensational footballers. You've just mentioned a couple there. Then you've got your David Batties, your David Ginolas, your Peter Beardsleys, your Andy Coles, your Alan Shearers, your Les Ferdinands, your Faustino Osprey, Philippe Albert, Steve Howie, just rattle them all off all the time. Michael Owen, even though Michael didn't have a particularly good time at Newcastle, I think it was a choice that he didn't really want to make. He wanted to go back to Liverpool. I think he's made that clear in the media since it's happened, since he stopped. But some unbelievable footballers and great lads as well.
And the one thing that obviously you say you only played for 3 clubs, one of them was actually Newcastle's biggest rivals as well. Just talk to us about that switch, how that came about, and obviously your thoughts when you made the move.
Well, it was the previous season was that I decided that I was leaving, and I wanted to go. There was a spell where I'd done really well in the team, and Kenny Dalglish had come in, and I got on really well with Kenny, and I took over from Kevin. And the club had offered us, and Kenny had sanctioned a new 5-year contract. But as I said, there was so much competition for places, and I'd done really well in this month. We'd gone to we won the FA Cup replay against Charlton, where me and Shearer had scored, and we beat them 2-1. We went to Villa Park and beat Villa 2-0. Me and Shearer scored, I think, again then, and then went down to Southampton away and drew 2-2. Myself and Les Ferdinand scored. So I was on a run as well, if not just good performances, I was putting goals in. And then we had a quarter-final FA Cup tie against Forest, and a few players came back from injury, and I was the player left out, and I made the decision then, which was in the January, that it was time to move on. And I had the chance. Well, my ex-teammate Paul Bracewell was now assistant manager at Sunderland with Peter Reid, and they contacted us to see if I'd be interested in the January. They were really struggling at the bottom end of the Premier League, and I said no, I wanted to see the season out in Newcastle and then decide my future in the summer. So stayed at Newcastle. We finished second again in the Premier League, and then, the conscious decision, turned down the contract offer from Newcastle and decided to move on. Spoke to Celtic and Rangers, spoke to Manchester City, Derby County, Everton and Villa, and so under Brian Little and then John Gregory. So it was, and then Sunderland were the last club. And when I went into the meeting, I said to Peter Reid, listen, I come out with respect. There's no chance you're going to be getting us to sign a contract. And after 4 bottles of pink champagne later, I'd signed a 5-year deal. So, but on the serious side of it, I was still young. My wife was from Newcastle. We just had our first child. He was only 2 at the time, and we were, settled in the northeast. And that was a big factor as well. And plus the fact that we're moving in. Yeah. And I got the impression Peter Reid was a similar character to Kevin Keegan, and that proved to be the case. So I had 2 brilliant years.
And then, obviously, like you say, Fulham was your other club. Again, good couple of years there I think you was playing for Fulham at the time I really started to follow football, and I always remember the Fulham shirt, white with the 1 black sleeve. I'm pretty sure you was there for that season, and like you say, you ended back up at Newcastle again. Then going into your managerial career, you took over at Huddersfield, and obviously you guided them to 2 playoff finals and a record unbeaten run. Just talk to us about your time there. Obviously, that unbeaten run and the feeling that was in and around the squad and the management team at that time.
No, what we done is we went into a football club, and I was lucky the owner was a Huddersfield fan. He'd become successful in his personal and life, and done well in business. And he wanted to do something, and he decided to buy his local football club, and that was his first appointment. And the good thing for me, it could be a good and a bad thing. It didn't resemble a football club. The manager's office at the stadium was just a basic office, white walls. There's no indication that there was anything to do with football. Our training facility was a couple of hired pitches by the local university, where the standard of the pitch wasn't great, and the facilities, the couple of porta cabins that we got changed in weren't particularly endearing. But we changed the mindset. We targeted young, hungry players in the first few transfer windows, and then after that, got a bit of experience. And what we done, we built a football club, we built a recruitment team and department. We earmarked a training facility, which is now, top class Premier League facility since I've been back. And what we done, we had a good team on the pitch, but we had added value off it. There was no players for sale when we walked in the door. They had one signing that 250,000 for Gary Roberts from Ipswich Town. At the time, Gary would have probably got you half the money back. The team wasn't playing particularly well. He wasn't firing on all cylinders. But then we got players in. We got Lee Peltier, 75,000 from Yeovil, who eventually went to Leicester City for 1.2 million. We got Anthony Pilkington from Stockport for 200,000. And I sold to Norwich actually with a dislocated and broken ankle when they were in the Premier League for 3.5 million, and I probably would have got 7 or 8 if he hadn't have been going there with the injury. And obviously Jordan Rhodes, that we ended up, once they got promoted, I think his fee went up to 800,000, who they sold to Blackburn for 11.5 million. So they were just a couple. We had Alex Smithies, the goalkeeper, who came through the academy. We sold, gave him his debut. Jack Hunt, a full-back, who actually gave his first game down at the Emirates in the FA Cup against the likes of the Fabregas and Van Persies of this world, and was outstanding. So, yeah, we not only built a good team, an exciting team, added value to it, and the club just took off. And as you say, losing semi-finalists the first full season to a good Millwall team, and then lost disappointingly in the final to Peterborough the following year, and then the following season in 3rd place with 2 games in hand. If we'd have won those, would have went top of the table. Lost my position at the club. So it's great times. Still speak with the owner now. Fantastic club. Really enjoyed it. and as you say, 43 games unbeaten, beat the late great Brian Clough's record by 1 game. And for anybody to go through that a long length of time without losing a football match is a phenomenal achievement. So, yeah, really proud of that one.
Yeah, and like you say, obviously that incredible achievement. Just talk us through the disappointments you suffered in the playoffs. Obviously, like you say, twice in there, and both times failed to go up. What was the feeling in and around the dressing room after the first time round, and how did you pick the players up after that?
Well, the first one, to be honest with you, is like I said to you, we had a strategy in the transfer market which was backed by a strong owner, and I knew where we were going, and I was allowed to strategically do this. And what I'd done in the first couple of transfer windows, I'd bought young, up and coming, hungry players. So we earmarked them. So we had a really young team, and Millwall at the time had were the opposite end of the scale, very experienced, very physical. Kenny Jackett, experienced manager in those positions. So even though we're really disappointed over the 2 legs, I think we lost 2-0 on aggregate or 2-1. I knew what we needed to do to add to the group, and that had been earmarked in any way in our recruitment process, because as I said, the first 2 or 3 windows was young, hungry, up and coming players. Then the next 1 or 2 windows was going to be adding a bit more experience, but still with quality. And we done that. And so even though it was massive disappointment, it wasn't as bad as people made out, because obviously we'd realised where we were in the journey. We'd realised what we'd come up against. We'd come up against the toughest opponent. But so we knew what we had to do to progress. And listen, the bottom line is, and I'll say this, and it's easy for us to say because no one can prove it. I lost Anthony Pilkington to his dislocation and fractured ankle in the February when we beat Rochdale on a Tuesday night. And if he had been fit for the rest of the season, we wouldn't have needed the playoffs. I think we finished 3rd on a record number of, I think had something like 90 points, 91 points, and didn't get automatic promotion. So he was the best player in the league by a million miles at the time. And if he had kept him fit, we wouldn't have needed the playoffs. But unfortunately, in a one-off game, we'd always had tough encounters against Peterborough the second time round. We didn't really produce on the day, and we didn't have any luck. They scored a goal, and then they scored a fluky second goal from a free kick that got deflected off the top of the wall within a minute, and then we were chasing the game. So, but we rebuilt again, and we were going again. We were going strong, but unfortunately, the owner decided to make a change.
Before I let Dan have the next question. Obviously, I think a lot of Huddersfield fans will say that you were successful there. I know, despite what we're talking about, not quite making it in the playoffs, with that record, which I'm sure still stands now in the league. And what lured you to Birmingham, and before you went in, was you aware of the size of the task?
No, because I'd had lengthy conversations with my predecessor and Chris Hughton. Chris had put me in strongly for the job, and I'd had many conversations both on the phone and face to face, and we talked through the strengths and weaknesses of the group and what was ahead. Chris did say that there could be 1 or 2 financial issues. He didn't realise how bad they were himself, and I absolutely didn't. When I obviously had the couple of meetings with the club, the first one was like an interview where I obviously passed that, and then they wanted to speak to me with regarding the job and what my thoughts were. All the indications were I could go out and strengthen the group and really push for top quality players to carry on the good work Chris had achieved the season before getting into the playoffs. So I was excited. It was an opportunity to manage a really big club, passionate fans, great facilities, and to get a chance to take it into the Premier League if I got the right signings right to go with the players who were already there. So, and that So I took over on the July the 1st, and we went to Austria for pre-season, and when we came back from there, the list of players that I'd given them to go and sign was just basically ripped up, and I was told that the funds were dramatically being cut and the budget was getting ripped up that had been said we were going to have, and it was getting reduced dramatically. And then obviously the news came out that Carson was under house arrest. His assets were getting frozen. So we went from a club that really was wanting to go and push and carry on the good work of the previous manager, and even try and get in automatic positions, where we were then trying to help survive. And because of the way the finances were, start getting put under transfer embargoes, which proved really difficult. And then having to sell the players that I didn't want to sell to keep the club going. And that was obviously the Jack Butlins and the Nathan Redmonds of this world, because I wanted to build a team around those young players. Yes, if the club never got promoted within a period of time, we knew we would have to sell those lads because they were special talents. But they were local lads. They loved the club, and they were prepared, if they could see improvement in ambition to get out, they would have hung around. So that was, that was the difficult one for me. But you still, as the manager, had to still keep the expectation. And I was never, unhappy with the fans' expectation. They were a brilliant part of the club. I never wanted to dampen their expectation, but I couldn't come out and basically tell them the reality of the situation. An example of the scenarios I was working on, that was Ashley Westwood, the midfield player who's now with Burnley. With the contacts we had a really strong contact with Swansea at the time. Swansea were Premier League. My head of recruitment, Malcolm Crosby, knew their head of recruitment really strong from that Middlesbrough connection. And Swansea were going to buy Ashley Westwood from Crewe for, a couple of £1 million, but they felt at that time he wasn't ready for the Premier League, and they wanted him to make the jump from Crewe to the Premier League by, in between that, playing in the Championship for a club like Birmingham that, you're under pressure by the size of the club and the fans. So we'd agreed a deal that once they signed him, we would take him on a season-long loan and only have to pay, which was, in our remit and in our level of pay at that time, was £5,000 a week. So when I made the phone call to Hong Kong to ask Peter Panu and Carson Young if we could do the deal, I was basically told that there was no money in the coffers to do it. And then within an hour of that phone call being made, Carson and Peter were on the phone again to tell me, would I like to take Jermaine Jenis and Aurelio Gomez from Tottenham on loan for a combined salary contribution of £30,000 a week. So within a couple of hours, I couldn't bring a player in I wanted for £5,000, and they were trying to get me to get two players, for £30,000. One, Aurelio Gomez, and I explained that I had Jack Butland, who was going to be my number one. And the feedback was, well, just make him your number two. The reason Aurelio Gomez wanted to leave Spurs was because he was number two. So here I'm going to give myself a headache by bringing him in. And Jermaine is someone I respected a huge amount from his time at Newcastle. A fantastic footballer, but was coming at the end of a glorious career and was picking up lots of injuries at the time. So, and it didn't make sense. And so for one, and I think when you look at it, the core light of day is the reason Ashley Westwood didn't come was because they didn't know Ashley Westwood because he was coming from Crewe Alexandra. But they knew Jermaine Jenis and Aurelio Gomez, and it was lighting them up, and they could find the £30,000 a week to bring those two players in, or they probably couldn't. They probably would have done it, and we would have probably, made the position even worse by what happened after that, rather than bringing in a player who would have done a really good job for us on a sixth of that payment. So that was an example. Another one was Carson every Friday would send his team through to my PA that he would like to be picked for the Saturday game, and that would be shredded within seconds and put in the bin, because actually if you speak to the players, I always probably named the team on the Thursday or Friday, and anyway the only time I named it on the day of the game was if we had any issues regarding players with little niggly injuries and we had to wait up until the last minute. Most of the time the preparation work had been done through the week. But it was funny because I used to laugh with my PA when she used to come and knock on my door on a Friday afternoon when I was sitting, and then we'd just have a little giggle and have a look at what team he was expecting us to put out and all. It was, and then I just asked her to put the piece of paper in the shredder. So that's, something that is stuff that you kind of come out with at the time, but you having to work under those. I mean, the British administration team, Joanne Alsop, Julia Shelton, fantastic people. They kept the club afloat. They kept us abreast of everything that was going on, explaining the embargo. So, for example, if I was letting a player go who was on £10,000 a week, hypothetically, I could bring a replacement in, but they could only cost the club £7,500. So I couldn't bring a player in on the same amount of money or more money. It had to be less than for what they were going out. And it was like 1 for 1, or if I got 2 out, I could bring 2 in, but for combined less fees than the 2 salaries that we were moving out of the club. And that's the way it had to work. And then obviously the 2 players I paid any money for in my time at the club was one, Paul Caddis. We paid a nominal fee for Paul, which because I forced the club's hand. I was desperate to get Paul in, and then obviously David Davis, because we sold Tom Adeyemi on the day before the season started for a huge amount of profit, because we'd got Tom unbelievably on a free transfer from Norwich, a kid I knew from the youth ranks there, and then a year later, 2 nights before our first game up at Middlesbrough, and I was having dinner with Panos Pavlakis, he just said basically, listen, Lee, we've agreed a fee with Cardiff for Tom Adeyemi, in excess of £1 million. So that was a good profit on Tom, because he wasn't picking up a huge salary either. And I just had to say, listen, Panos, you need to find if there's any way there's any of that funds I can get. And I think they end up giving us 150,000 of that to go and buy David Davis from Wolves. So those were the 2 players, and then obviously having to loan a lot of players and trust in the academy boys, the local lads, which were a big bonus for me. They kept us going through some tough periods.
I think the question that a lot of Blues fans would want to know is the 2013-14 season. It was chaotic, wasn't it, for yourself? I can imagine, because first half of the season we had quite a few different players to what we did in the second half of the season, and it all came down to the last day, and I don't think we'll ever forget it, because I think I was blubbering like a baby for about 80 minutes of the game.
Well, it ended up being a fairy story, didn't it, at the end? And it's something you could never have predicted. 96th minute, the smallest player on the pitch getting the goal that kept the club in the league. But going back to how you start the question, you're absolutely spot on. The first group of loan signings we made were terrific. Jesse Lingard, I mean, I'm sitting watching Jesse last night, and it brought back the memories of his debut for us. And he scored 4 and the exciting goals and player he was for us. Obviously, Kyle Bartley, we had on loan Dan Byrne. Him and Dan provided a fantastic central defensive partnership. Strong, good balance, left and right footed. We had Aaron McLean, who was more of a squad player, but done a great job across any positions on the front line. And if you remember, we played Barnsley on the New Year's Day in Drew at St Andrews, and that had made we went on a 10-game unbeaten run. I think we went 5 wins and 5 draws in that period, and we got ourselves into about 7th or 8th position, about 3 or 4 points out of the playoffs. And I remember sitting at home and just having a bite, eating a glass of beer, and Julia Shelton rang us up and said, Lee, are you sitting down? I says, yeah, what's up? She said, I've had all of the clubs on, they're recalling their players who are on loan. So every single loan player we had that done a terrific job for us in the first half of that season, the clubs had exercised that week clause. There was a week in January of all those signings where the clubs could recall them, and they recalled every player back. And I had to, try and find another group of loan signings that could do the fantastic job that the first group had done. And 2, I had to do it quickly because we had a game coming up in 3 or 4 days. And as we know, we brought some exciting players in, but some of them were on their first loans, which are always difficult. And others need a bit more time to gel. And the second group of loan players weren't as effective as a group or in gelling with the team. They were still talented individuals, but it didn't work as well. And we obviously tumbled down the league. And as you say, came to the very famous visit to Bolton Wanderers.
So just going through that day, what were the emotions? What were the emotions? What were you feeling before the game?
Well, it's weird, and I think a lot of people don't really believe this when I say it, but we travelled up to Bolton the night before. We had the meeting with the players, then I had a meeting with the staff, and then I just said, listen, choose what you want to do. If you want to go and relax in your room and chill out and just don't think about football. If you we're going to go and watch, there was a sports part of the hotel. We'll go in there. There was a live match on. We'll go in there and have a couple of beers to chill. We didn't do that. Just everyone stay. Whatever you do, just chill out. Don't. The game will take care of itself. Woke up the next morning, was really relaxed, and just had this feeling that the lads were ready. We're going to deliver. The staff, we were all, I could sense the determination. Sorry, it got me. Sorry, I lost you there. I was getting a call. And what I'd done is leading up to the game, and I thought, I was always thinking how you could change the mindset of the players, how you could do something a bit different. And what I've done is leading up to the game, I spoke to the staff, and I got my analyst staffs in, and I got my PA, and I says, I want us to get a hold of all the family members of each player, the mums or the dads or the wives or the girlfriends and the children, the brothers and the sisters, and get them to put them to get on camera and just put some messages on there. And I purposely didn't watch it. I just said, cut it, how you doing it? And some of the staff watched it, and I said, what's it like? And they said, you'll be astounded by it. So I purposely didn't watch it. I wanted to watch it when the players did, which was our last meeting after our pre-match meal at the hotel before we left to go to the ground. And they started the video. I just said, lads, listen, got some messages and some footage for you to watch. So we'd done our couple of minutes of work where we showed them the footage of what Bolton were about, the tactical stuff, the set players, etc. And then I put this footage on of their families, their kids, and the room just went quiet. Could have heard a pin drop, and the emotion in the room, the tears in the eyes, because the families seeing how proud they were of the lads and just give it one more go. And they were playing for a brilliant club and brilliant fans, and the emotion in the room was, you could cut it with a knife. It was, it done the job, I could tell. And the atmosphere as we left was just completely different. I could sense. And I thought the lads played well in the game. Well, another story leading up to that one, away from home's a bit different. When you're in the dressing room, it's home games. You've got your own office. You can go in and chill out, have a cup of tea, watch the live game that's on previous or whatever. And but away, you're obviously stuck in the dressing room, and So when the players went out, I was in there on my own, so just a bit of me time. And I just sent my wife and children, who ended up being a long text to say thank them for their support, and I was going to give. I'd done all the preparation, and we're going to give it everything for the next 94, 95 minutes. I feel strong, and I've got good belief in the players. I had a good feeling, and I sent that and got some nice words back from my wife and children. So we went out, and I thought we played well. And they had a couple of chances and scored, and we're 2-0 down. Doncaster are getting the positive result at Leicester, and we're staring down the barrel. And I remember turning to Malcolm Crosby, who I'd brought in for the last few games for his experience and in management, etc. And I just said to Malcolm that we're going to do this. And he agreed, he nodded his head, but I think in reality, he must have thought this fella's a cracker, because I think we had about 25 minutes to go. But I didn't have any fears. I thought, and then obviously we got to 2-1. The result came through that Leicester were winning. And, you know, is there no, the rest's history. I mean, another line to that was, I'd worked with Nigel Pearson at Newcastle. I'd got a really strong friendship with Nigel. He was manager of Leicester City, who were playing Doncaster. Nigel had worked with Paul Dickoff as well at the club, and Paul was an ex-Leicester player. And what Nigel had done in the week, they had already gone up as champions. And Nigel said, listen, lads, I think the world of you both. Yous are cracking lads. I've worked with you in different quarters, managed you, Paul, worked with you, Lee. My team's going to give it everything to win the game. We've won the league, but we're going to go out and treat it like every game. We're not resting anybody. We're not this, we're not that. And that was brilliant from him. I couldn't, he couldn't have done any more. If his players took their foot off the gas, there was nothing he could have done, because he was demanding that they didn't. And thankfully, his players and him, not that I doubted it, I knew what type of man he was. They stuck to their side of the bargain, and we had to do ours. And as I said, when Jeff Stelling, I think that they brought the live cameras to us, because we went into the 94th, 95th, 96th minute of injury time, and for that to happen, and then seeing the crazy manager running down the touchline, it was I think it made for it was probably one of the best soccer Saturday moments, I think, for them.
You never lost your post, did you?
You cannot lose what you never had. At least I know one thing, I was quicker than Barry Fry.
It's funny you mentioned the Soccer Saturday coverage on that day, because I remember, and we spoke to Paul Robinson previously, and I said I remember when on that day, and I was watching it, I had a bet on with it. I think I had Leicester to win, and I had Blues to win or draw. And I was watching it on my phone, and it'd come up saying that we'd equalise, but it hadn't come up on Soccer Saturday yet. And the missus and her family were going, we've equalised. And I was going, I don't believe you. And then as soon as I saw Cadiz head it in, I just charged around the house. I was going mental. I was crying, a bit like Dan. I just couldn't believe it. And that's just as a fan, the emotion of it. So to imagine for yourself to be in that moment with the players, is just something you might not ever experience again, I suppose.
Well, it was pure emotion, and it was real emotion, and it was the honesty when you see us, and I'm pointing at the fans, and that was, that was genuine. That was to say, that was for you. We shouldn't have put you through that type of emotion in any way, but thankfully you've supported the team right until the end. It's called support, and that's what they've done. The huge numbers they turned out with it on that day, and the way they supported us, they got us through it. And that was just to say to them, thank you for that. When you're the manager, you've got that to worry about, the reaction of the fans, and the dedication and the support they've given you and the players in the club. But you've also got the implications if you go down. The money situation was horrendous to start with, but if you go down, there was no doubt there was going to be cost cutting, and who's the first people to go when there's cost cutting? Is the great people behind the scenes, and most of those in football clubs are locals who are supporters of that club, and that was certainly the case with Birmingham City. The fans, the staff behind the scenes loved the club. I used to speak to them daily basis. They would reminisce about old times and what the club meant to them, and that was a big factor for me as well, because it was nothing to do with myself. That was the least important thing of it all. The most important was, one, the club staying up and not getting itself into what I called it would have been financial Armageddon, which I believe it would have been, into League One. 2, great people behind the scenes not losing their jobs. And 3, and not least in that order, the supporters, so not seeing their club go into League One, and for the support they had given us and the numbers. And that day, the way they turned out, and even at 2-0, still singing and still getting behind the players, no adverse reactions, which there could easily have been. They helped us immensely.
I think I don't think any of us will forget that day at Bolton, I think, for the rest of our lives. But there was a couple of crazy games that season. I think that was the season we won 4-0 at Palace, wasn't it? And I think it was that season. Yeah. I mean, I was there. I was at that game. It was unreal. I even had a spare ticket. My dad turned it down. He still regrets that to this day. But there was another crazy game I really wanted to ask you about, was that one at Yeovil in the Cup. And when I think it was, we were winning 2-1 going into stoppage time, and we kicked the ball out for an injury, and then they didn't give the ball back, and they chipped. I think it was Colin Doyle at the time.
Yeah.
What happened there? And
well, 2-1. Dan Burn had gone down with a genuine injury. Our lads kicked it out. It was coming up to seconds left. The game was over, and we were expecting Yeovil to throw the ball back. It was a big centre half, Webster, who'd gone up as a striker. And I could hear Gary Johnson saying, "No, give it to us, give it to us." And I was trying to get a message onto Colin Doyle. There was all commotion going around because Colin started walking out as if the ball was going to come back to him. And I was trying to say to Colin, "They're not going to do it. Get back on your goal line." And in this noise, we couldn't get the message. And they took the throw and they just put the ball over the top of Colin. And all our lads were waiting for them to return the ball, which has happened not 99 times out of 100. It's happened 100 times out of 100. And it was a disgrace. It was the worst bit of sportsmanship I'd ever seen. And I was absolutely livid with our manager, Gary Johnson. He tried to make out he didn't say that. He did. The dugouts are very close at Yeovil, and I understand, what was said, and I exactly clear. Thankfully, we won it on penalties, but we shouldn't have had to go down that route. And, I gave him a piece of my mind, and it's the first time in my career and the only time in my career where I've never gone in my opposite number's office to have a drink with and have a chat after the game, win, lose or draw. I felt I didn't want to. It was not totally, against what I was about, what the game was about, what I'd been brought up on, what I'd seen in the past. And it was total carnage, which could have been eradicated. And I get it, but 100%, I've been in that position myself, both as a manager and a player, when you're losing a game and you've got the ball, but there's been an incident, and the right thing to do is to give it back to the opposition. As I said, it's not even 99 times out of 100, it's 100 times out of 100. So, thankfully, we got through in the end, but I'm glad we won because, when I mentioned what I just said to you guys in the press, it wasn't sour grapes then. If we had lost the game, I still would have said the same, but it would have been brought up as sour grapes. So, when you win the game, when you're making a point like that, even though everyone knew I was right, whether we won, lost or drew, but, you know what it's like, the way the media would have turned things that, sour grapes that we'd lost, and thankfully we didn't. But it didn't leave a good taste in my mouth, that's for sure.
They went, didn't they go 3-2 up before they allowed us to walk the ball in, didn't they?
Yeah, because that's what Gary said, didn't he? Gary said, "Oh, we've allowed you to score, so that's us apologising." Whereas, the game would have been over and anyway. Yeah, because I think that was in normal time, wasn't it, when they got the equaliser for 2-2. They went up 3-2 in extra time and allowed us to equalise. And I think that was him trying to say, "Oh, that's us apologising."
Oh.
I'm pretty sure I remember his comments at the time were along the lines of as well. It was a bit unsportsmanlike, but people keep faking injuries here. It basically says that it happens all the time for Yeovil, but there's no excuse for unsportsmanlike behaviour, is there really?
Not at all.
I mean, one of the things from your time at the club as well was there a bit of a fallout with Big Ziggy at one point?
Not at all. Had a great relationship with the big man. I just had come to the end of my tether when I came out in public to say that I was disappointed in his training performances. The big fella was unplayable when he wanted to play, and that was the problem we had with him. He didn't always want to play. and this day was just touching on what I told you earlier, we'd worked a couple of days on some formation and shape and personnel of a team and how we were going to play both for and against, both with the ball and without the ball. And on the first day, he hadn't showed a lot of enthusiasm. And this wasn't the first time that had happened. And then on the second day, when we continued the work, leading up to the game, he done the same, and I wasn't having it, and people maybe thought that it was me just having to go after he'd done it the first occasion. This had been a build up, and when I spoke to the senior players in the group before I'd done the press conference, I got them in the leadership group we had and explained and what their thoughts were, and they were in agreement. It was the right thing to do, because I tried getting them in the office. I tried on a one-to-one, saying it wasn't acceptable. I tried it in front of the other players, and this was the last throw of the dice for me to try and, say to them, you're an important player for us, and we need you to lead by example in everything that you do. And it worked. I had to do. I felt, and if the scenario happened again, I'd do the same. I'd give it plenty of time, and it could have been rectified behind the scenes. And unfortunately, it kept happening, so we had to do something else. And there was lots of opportunities. Ziggy was aware, but I had a great relationship with him. We spoke numerous times, because obviously we were trying. The big thing every window was we were having to try and offload him, and I would talk to him and about the situation. I knew he loved being a Birmingham City player, and he loved the area. So, there was no fallout at all. In terms of that, I had a hell of a lot of respect for him, and the only other disappointment I had with him was the famous day down at Bolton. He bought the beers for the journey home, and he bought the cheap beers. I thought he would have bought the best ones.
He had lots of thoughts though with the money he was rumoured to be on. I mean, one thing that obviously you always brought to the touchline was obviously plenty of passion. We've seen it on the last day at Bolton when you done your 100-metre sprint down the line. One other thing that obviously stands out was the game against Burnley at home.
I rode a good pair of Gucci shoes that day.
Yeah, when we mentioned it to Robbo a couple of weeks back when we spoke to him, and he says that the lads were saying they're giving you a bit of stick in the dressing room afterwards, but it just goes to show how much the game's meant to you, I suppose, doesn't it, really?
What it was, I don't know what had happened the previous game to that Burnley game. We played away, and I was sat up in the stands, and we won. And I thought, I'll do it again at St Andrews. And I thought we're playing well against a good Burnley team, and we're getting some horrendous decisions against us by the ref. So while I was sitting upstairs, I was sitting with the referee's assessor, and these decisions were getting worse and worse. And I was saying to him, what do you think? What do you think? And he was agreeing with the ref. So I was getting myself wound up, but I couldn't do anything. So I decided to come down from the stand and go into the technical area, and I just let loose. And then obviously we're 3-1 down. I think that was one of the youngest ever starting 11s for Birmingham City. We had so many teenagers in the starting 11 that day. The Mitchell Hancocks and Callum Riley's, Will Packwood and all these were playing, I think, that day. And I was getting wound up because we weren't getting the rub of the green off the officials. And then obviously we went 3-2, Kiko Makeda, and then he scored a second one. And I went down the line, and as I started to come back to the technical area, I started booting advertising hoardings. So I didn't get the usual fine by getting sent off, because I took my anger out on the advertising hoarding, and I never got sent to the stands. So I didn't get fined by the FA, but the club tried to get us to pay for a new advertising hoarding. But I was there. Listen, that was one of the standout games for me, because that Burnley team was a team that went on to get promotion again. And my young players that night were excellent. As I said, I felt they weren't getting the rub of the green, but they kept fighting right until the end. And when Kiko scored that equalising goal, it was the least they deserved, the young players that night.
I mean, Obviously, when it came to an end at Blues, and what was it like? You know, what were the feelings for yourself around your exit at the club? But did you feel you could have done more? Was you disappointed, or did you think maybe it was the right time for a change? Or
no, listen, it was a very emotional time when I got summoned to St Andrews from West Hills. I'd just been prepping the team to go up to Blackburn on the Tuesday night. It was the Monday, and we just lost to Bolton on the Saturday. And when they said, they were terminating my contract, there was obviously tears. There was a lot of emotion. I was losing a job I loved. I knew it was a difficult job. I knew I was under pressure, but it was one I was loving. My family loved living down in the area, and so it was an emotional time for us. So, yeah, of course, when I look back, I made mistakes. Of course, I did. I didn't get a lot of help, and I was working under some really difficult circumstances, which I couldn't divulge to the fans the full amount of that. But I absolutely loved it, and I wish if I could put the clock back and do it again, of course there'd be things I'd do differently. There was other things that I couldn't do any differently. I think there was some good things that came out of it. The youngsters that I gave, I unleashed Damari Gray to the club after only 2 under-23s games and give him an opportunity. I wasn't frightened to give the young players some of the exciting loan players I brought in. Some of the signings we made on, my last transfer window, I was signing players from other clubs where we weren't even matching what they could get at other clubs. I think me taking them to West Hills and then taking them to St Andrews, and then we'd put a bit of footage together of the passion of the fans, the city, something for the waves, because obviously you've got to keep the families happy of the players. And that's how we got some of the players there we did in me last summer, because we were at a bottom 3 playing budget. And so, yeah, listen, but the day I got relieved of my duties was very, very emotional, very sad. Shed a tear. I'm not frightened to say that. I'd lost a job I was loving doing, and it hit us really hard. But I know the environment I was in, and difficult. The lads then went up to Blackburn, I think, lost, and then obviously the infamous Bournemouth game the following Saturday when the 8 goals going past them as well. It was tough. So it was, as I said, I could have done things a lot better in certain aspects, and things could have been different for me as well. I could have been given a bit more help, as I say.
I think I speak for every Birmingham fan. I think, we all appreciated the circumstances, particularly more now what you had to work under. And, I think as Kieran mentioned, we just we loved your passion and your commitment to the club, and that definitely won't be forgotten. And as Dan said, certainly he certainly won't forget. We all won't forget the day of Bolton. So yeah, we appreciate your time.
The tough thing and the sad thing for me is, since I've left, with the exception of Gary, who done a terrific job after he took over from us, there's been so many managers been in there with lots more budget than me and money to spend on transfer fees for players. And the club, as I said, with the exception of Gary, have always unfortunately been in around the bottom 6 to 8 of the championship. And you look at where they are now, you're hoping they can turn it round. I mean, it's a nightmare for me at the moment. I've got Newcastle United in the bottom 6 of the Premier League. I've got Fulham in the bottom 3. Look like it's going to be difficult for them. Got Birmingham 4th bottom of the Championship. You've got Kilmarnock slipping down the table in Scotland in 3rd bottom, with the teams below them with games in hand. It's like, this shouldn't be right. I've got lockdown to contend with. And I'm watching all this live football, and all my previous clubs, or majority previous clubs, are all in a little bit of turmoil. So, I mean, I think I'm going to have to, I'm not going to get lucky with all of them. I fear after watching last night, I think Fulham are going to it's going to be a big job for them to stay up. I hope they can. It'll take a miracle, I think. But I think the other ones, I think obviously the Blues will be fine. Hopefully the signings they made will settle quickly and they can get a couple of victories to get them away. Would rather them winning. But yeah, so it's even got us on tender hooks when I'm not involved now. All these clubs that I played for, I worked for, hanging on by a knife edge.
That's what football can do to you, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, I'm out of it, but I'm still not out of it, if you know what I mean.
You're never out of it.
That being said, just quickly, I mean, what are your plans now going forward? Do you see yourself getting back into management again, or are you just enjoying being a spectator now?
No, well, it's harder. We're not a spectator anymore, but I did enjoy being a fan again. But, you know, certain jobs I have applied for, which I haven't got. I've been offered other ones that I wasn't interested in. So, but I do. Listen, it's a bug. It's they say it's a drug. I wouldn't know. I've never took a drug. So, but it's a bug. It's certainly got you in when you've been in it. You know, since I left school, it's been my life. People say, "Why do you want to go back into management?" It's a crazy old business, and it is, and it's getting harder. You get less time to get results. The players have a lot of power, but you do. It's the next best thing to play, and it's that adrenaline rush. Got to say, I mean, what's made it a little bit easier for us at the moment, because obviously there's no fans, so you know there's not that atmosphere at the games. That would be something I would be missing. It's a long time since I've been to the game as a spectator as well. I suppose when we do get back to some kind of normality, and if I'm still out the game and the fans are allowed back in, that'll start hurting again, because obviously that adrenaline rush on a Saturday or whenever it is on a midweek game, getting ready for the game kicking off, and you know the noise of the supporters, the emotion of the game is something you miss. So if the right opportunity comes around for us, you know, I will certainly like to get back into it. But you know, other things to worry about at the moment, obviously with the pandemic, and just staying safe is the key for everyone now.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll wrap it up there, because I know obviously you've got stuff to do as well. Thanks again for your time. It's been brilliant to sit down and talk to you about your time at the club and your career as well.
Thanks, guys. Keep right
Thanks,
on.
Lee.
All the best.
Thank you.
You
See
too,
you
mate.
later.
Cheers, Lee. Speak to you later, mate.
Bye. Bye.
That was Lee Clark there, joining us for a Q&A. Thanks again, Elliot and Dan, for joining me on this episode as well. You can follow us on social medias at BCFC Media. Keep your eyes peeled, more interviews and more podcast episodes to come very shortly. Until then, speak to you soon.